Good afternoon, everyone. This is Susan Shockey from USDA NEFA, the Division of Family and Consumer Sciences. Today, we're really pleased to be offering our first Money Smart Week event from USDA NEFA. Thanks to Extension Financial Security for All for hosting today's event. And I want to share with you that we have two excellent presenters. I'm just really, again, very pleased that we're able to pull this presentation together for you as we celebrate Money Smart Week. So you are participating or will participate in the 60-minute webinar. We have online with us today Dr. Barbara O'Neill, who is from Rutgers and Cooperative Extension. And Barbara is a state specialist there, and as you know, a real strong leader for us throughout our system. And she also, maybe you didn't know this, is that she is co-chair of the Financial Security for All E-Extension team and also serves on the multi-state research team, the behavioral economics through the lifespan. So Barbara will be presenting first, and then we're really pleased that Cindy Forbes Cameron will be speaking with us today from the Department of Education, the Federal Student Aid Office. And so I hope that you read both of their bios. I think it's going to be a terrific in-service today. And thanks again, Barb and Cindy. And then also thanks to Extension again. Over to you.
Okay, this is Barb O'Neill, and I'm very pleased to be leading off the webinar today. I will speak for approximately 15 minutes, and then Cindy will take the rest of the time sharing resources for those of you who are either affected by the college student cost issue personally and or are doing teaching and research on this topic. So two of the big concerns that we see with student loans are the increasing frequency of their use by students. And some people have said that going to college effectively means going into debt for a large majority of American college students, and that percentage now has topped 70%. So 70% of students are carrying some kind of debt. And then also the sheer size of the loan debt, the increasing amounts. And we're seeing that for two groups, the college students who actually get a degree, and then unfortunately for those who don't complete a degree program, they lack the income boost that also often comes with a college degree, and then they still have to pay back debt that they borrowed. So they're a particular group of concern for a lot of people. So we all know that college is expensive, and in the decade between 2003 and 2013, state funding for colleges decreased by 12%, and median tuition rose 55% across all public colleges. And by the way, I put in a number of these slides the links where I got this information from, so you can see the name of the source and also link to it if you'd like. And for those of you that have two monitors, you may want to use one monitor for the webinar and then the other one to open up some of these links. And so in the face of all these increases in cost, students really have had only two methods of elasticity in response to paying for college. And one is to select a lower cost college to attend, and then another one, of course, is to take on more debt and have more student loan payments to make. So a little bit of statistics kind of set the background here. In 2010, the total outstanding student loan debt rose to over $800 billion. And at that point, it overtook the amount of debt on credit cards for the first time, as well as auto loan debt. So pretty much the only debt that Americans have in the aggregate that is higher than student loans is mortgage debt. And if you're not familiar with it, there's a website you can go to, the Student Loan Debt Clock, and it's pretty similar to the national debt clock that runs in New York City, and it's constantly moving the numbers. So I checked it just last week, and it was $1.3 trillion and change that's owed collectively on student loans. And the latest statistic I found is that the average amount of debt owed by students who graduated in 2013 was $28,400. And then, as I said before, 71% of all students graduating from four-year colleges had student loan debt. So obviously, we're concerned about the amount of debt that's being carried by students and also the increasing frequency. A little bit more in statistics, and again, there's links if you want to follow these up further. The average cumulative debt of the bachelor's degree recipient increased, and you can see the percentages. It was a 9% increase between 2002, 2003, and 2007, 2008, those academic years. But then more recently, it's been a 24% increase in the last basically 5 years, 2008-09 to 2000, that should be 12 and 13. Sorry about that typo there. And of course, the graduates of for-profit colleges have had the higher amounts of debt than those in public and private nonprofit colleges. So that's been a concern. And the latest statistics I found based on the Survey of Consumer Finances, or SCF, was a monthly average payment of $242. So that's something that's a little bit interesting. So I just lost my screen. I'm seeing names of people rather than the slides, and I'm not exactly sure why. There we go. Okay, so some of the impacts of student loans, both on the students themselves and on society, that have been reported in recent years. Some people have referred to the generation of millennials that are carrying student loan debt as generation indebted. And of course, there's an opportunity cost. When you are paying back student loans, that's obviously money that's crowding out other types of spending that young adults could be doing. So many young adults are postponing their savings, their initial savings for retirement, perhaps. And of course, this has implications for reduced wealth accumulation throughout their life cycle. And then there's a lot of emotional distress, just having this sword, if you will, hanging over your head and having to pay student loan payments for maybe a decade or more. And there's been some evidence of young adults leading a postponed life. So they're postponing some of those key adulthood events, marriage, family formation, having children. And then career choices, depending on the amount of debt, they may make different choices than they would have if they didn't have debt to pay. For example, they might go into public service jobs versus maybe corporate jobs. And then there has been some reports of stifled entrepreneurship and the fact that with so much debt hanging over their heads, young adults aren't taking risks to create businesses. On society, we're seeing reduced and delayed home and auto purchases by young adults, decreased and delayed family formation, more young adults living with their parents and impacting their parents' finances, such as their ability to retire. And there was just recently a study that showed that people who have young adults coming back to live with them are retiring later than those who don't have their boomerang children, if you will. And then this lifetime wealth loss, the impacts there on society, you think about it, it's just money that's not available to be spent or invested. And again, the stifled entrepreneurship has implications for society as well as people who might be otherwise would-be entrepreneurs. So taken together, all of the data on the previous slides kind of begs the question, what were they thinking? You know, what were students and or their parents thinking when they made their student loan decisions? And did they fully understand the implications of their student loan borrowing decisions? So as Susan mentioned, I am one of probably, I guess there's about 15 or 16 of us that are part of multi-state. It's called NC 2172. And it's a multi-state research group composed of extension specialists and teaching and research faculty at land-grant universities. So there are a lot of these multiple state groups, and the one, of course, that we work with is in the personal finance area. So our research theme from 2013 to 2018 is behavioral economics and financial decision-making and information management across the lifespan. So in other words, what we're looking at in our research is how do households make decisions? And we're hoping that these results that we get from our research studies will inform efforts to improve financial decision making. So it will inform our cooperative extension programs, for example. So over this 5-year period, NC 2172 is going to be looking at decision making in 3 key areas of personal finance: student loans, retirement, and housing. And again, there's a link to read our research proposals if you want to know more about what we're doing. So what we decided to start out with student loan research. So that's what we've been focusing on for the last couple of years. And what we're trying to do is, we have 2 different types of research. We have an experimental design, which I'll talk about first, and then we have some focus group research. So with the experimental design, what we're trying to do is measure the participants' attitudes and willingness to take on student loans. So this is being done online in cooperation with a company called Survey Sampling International, or SSI. And then respondents are presented with a scenario describing a young person who is deciding to either attend college or go straight into the workforce. And then there's different treatments that are tested in the presentation of this information. And they have to relate to the return on the educational investment. So whether people have information that kind of shows the relationship between education and career earnings versus those who don't. And so there was a random assignment, and there were 3 different surveys, and again, treatments and control. So there's a group of, kind of a subgroup, if you will, of our NC 2172 group that is analyzing those data. And then the piece that I'm more involved with is the focus group study. So what we've been trying to do there is to understand the decisions that the students made with regard to the selection of a college and also the borrowing for student loans. So we had 3 rounds of data collection starting late last fall and going up until just last month. And we had 2 campus-based samples and also a sample through that company, SSI, that I mentioned before. And the data were collected through an online course platform. And if you've ever been involved with online courses and threaded discussions, well, we use that capability so that the students could effectively talk with one another by kind of replying to each other's posts. And in fact, we required that the participants, in order to get a gift card as an incentive, not only answer the questions themselves, but also reply to some of the responses from others in the sample. So what we really came up with is a very rich qualitative data set that talks about students' decision-making processes, their knowledge about their student loans, their thoughts, and even some of their emotions related to taking on student loan debt. So there's a group of 4 of us now who are currently working up a journal article, and we plan to have our first draft done next month. So these were just the questions that we asked the students, again, through these online focus groups. We asked them to tell us how they decided which colleges and universities to attend, how they felt about borrowing money for college, what assistance or sources of help did they have, if any, before taking out their loans, what they know about their loans, how they think their student loan debt is going to affect them economically after they graduate. And then the last 3 questions of the 8 that we asked are factors that influence their decision to accept the type of financial assistance that they're using, and then whether the financial aid had any effect on the number of college credits that they enrolled for. And then finally, the last question, sometimes students will get a refund of sorts. So in other words, there'll be borrowed funds that are remaining after they pay their tuition and fees. So we asked the students what they did with that money. And so we have a very rich data source, and again, we're kind of weaving together some qualitative data about the sample with qualitative data basically coming from the responses of the students to those 8 questions. I do want to mention, too, that our team has actually had its first deliverable, and that was a student loan literature review, and that was published as a Referee Journal article just recently, within the last 2 months, by the Family and Consumer Sciences Research Journal. So I've given you the citation for that. And what the authors of that article did was to look at theories related to student loan debt, the effect of student loans on college education, and also the effect of student loans on the post-school life of students. So looking at the existing literature. I also want to mention that E-Extension has a student loan webpage that we just recently put up, and it includes primarily information from Federal Student Aid, who you'll be hearing from in a minute, and we eventually hope to include research briefs that come from the published studies that NC 2172 members will have in the future. So you have a link for that page. So I'll stop here and see if there were any questions in the chat. I personally don't see any. So what I think I'll do is turn the webinar over to Cindy Forbes-Cameron from Federal Student Aid, who has become one of our strong partners in the last few months. And she will kind of take it from there and talk about the resources that they have to share.
Thanks very much. I am speaking on a headset, so if anybody has trouble hearing me, feel free to put a note in chat, and I'll try to speak up a little bit. I see that somebody's, oh, thank you. Somebody tells me I sound fine. Okay, good. I will try to keep my good projection going. I am the third of 6 children in my family, so I am naturally loud, so we should be fine. Happy Money Smart Week. I'm very happy to be participating today. And I'm going to talk to you guys about some resources that are made available by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid, which is where I work. The main thing I'm going to be talking about today is the Financial Aid Toolkit. That's a website, and it's at financialaidtoolkit.ed.gov. And just a little FYI, ED, actually the abbreviation that the U.S. Department of Education uses. Despite calling ourselves the Department of Education, we are not DOE. DOE is the Department of Energy. That's your little tidbit for the day. Anyway, the Department of Education has this massive office called Federal Student Aid, and we're the people who deal with the FAFSA, the application for financial aid. We deal with student loans, we deal with Pell Grants, and we have a couple of really great websites that I'm going to mention today, but I'm really going to focus very much on the Financial Aid Toolkit because I understand that a lot of people listening in on this webinar are people who are maybe kind of serving in a way as mentors, either directly to students or helping people who are helping students. So this site is for you guys. This is for the mentors. I will tell you what to do if you are a borrower yourself or if your child is a borrower and you really want information just for you. I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. So the Financial Aid Toolkit at financialaidtoolkit.ed.gov consolidates and organizes our resources and content into a searchable online toolkit. That's a big part of what it does, but it also does a little bit more than that, and I'm going to go through it bit by bit. It is for organizations and individuals that support or counsel or advise students and families about funding post-secondary education, which of course is a big stress factor for a lot of people. This is a view of the home page of the Financial Aid Toolkit. The site is structured around 4 main content areas, and you can see as you go across from left to right, there's 4 pictures in the middle of the page, and you can click on any of those, or you can click on the white on black menu at the top of the page. It's the same thing. They go to the same 4 sections. The first section is Learn About Financial Aid, and the idea there is that you, the mentor, will just get some high-level information about federal student aid to help pay for college so that you can sort of understand the basics without having to be an expert on it. Then conduct outreaches for people who want to reach out to their community or to their students if they're at a school, for instance, and make people more aware of what's available, how to apply, how repayment works, etc. The Get Training section is for the mentors to get organized training, like attending a webinar or in-person training, or sometimes there's an online type of thing they can do. Now, the difference between that section and the Learn About Financial Aid section is the Learn About Financial Aid section is kind of a self-propelled thing. You just kind of browse that part of the website and you learn through that. Get Training is more organized. It's like, at this time, at this place, such and such is going to happen, and you're going to learn X. So that's more of the, I want to drive down the road to this place and get this free training. We do focus on free training in that area. Then Search Tools and Resources is really cool, and I'm going to talk more about that in a little while. But just to give you a preview, what that section does is it provides a search functionality that will help you filter through the large quantity of resources that we have available, and will serve up to you some things that might be relevant to your needs at that time. So let's dive in. Okay, so the first section of the site is the Learn About Financial Aid section. And this is just one of the pages from that. If you click on Learn About Financial Aid in the menu at the top, you're going to, let me see if I can do draw. Nope, not working. I don't know how to use this technology. Anyway, so in the Learn About Financial Aid section of the site, you're going to get basic information and tips for working with students. What we try to do in this section is we try to provide tips and talking points for people who are mentoring students. So, a talking point might be something like, you should fill out your FAFSA no matter what, even if you think your parents' income is too high for you to get financial aid. Because the FAFSA is not only an application for Pell Grants and the federal student aid, but a lot of colleges use it to look at the student's information before they'll even consider that student for a merit scholarship at that school. So because you never know what aid you might get, everybody should fill out the FAFSA. So that's just one of the talking points that we might put in that section of the site. So it's very much geared toward people who are working with the students. Topics in this section include preparing for college, types of aid and eligibility, and this, of course, is mostly specifically federal student aid because it's our website. The FAFSA, we have a page called FAFSA Updates, which is amazing. If you want to keep track of when is the paper FAFSA going to be out, when is the FAFSA demo site going to be available, stuff like that, there are links to those from that page, and there's also information as the autumn goes on and these things start getting developed. There's information about approximately when they're going to be available, and you can keep checking back. There's a section about FAFSA completion data, so schools can find out how many students at my school have filled out their FAFSA so far this year, and then there's a section on loan repayment basics. And what we do consistently through this section of the site is we're constantly linking back to studentaid.gov for detailed information. Now, I know a lot of you guys are brand new to this stuff, so I'm just going to let you know what is studentaid.gov. That is our student site. So Financial Aid Toolkit.ed.gov is this site that I'm talking about here. It's for mentors. It's for the high school counselors. It's for the Upward Bound and student support services people. It's for the Boys and Girls Club person who's acting as, kind of an advisor to students who come through. It's for those dedicated, amazing librarians who want to help their patrons that come through the door. That's what the toolkit is. Studentaid.gov is the site that you want to go to if you are a student, if you're a parent, if you're a borrower, and you want information for yourself or for your family. That's the one with all the detail. That has got tons of information about really essentially these same topics. Preparing for college, types of aid, who gets aid, filling out the FAFSA, and repaying loans. But it really delves in deep, and it speaks to the student. The toolkit speaks to the mentor. So throughout the toolkit, we have links to studentaid.gov. We'll we'll talk a little bit about the topic, and we'll say, here's what you might want to point out to students, et cetera, and then we say, give your students this URL at studentaid.gov for them to get more information. And we include a lot of nice shortcut URLs. So it'll be something really quick like studentaid.gov/repay. And that goes to the repayment page with all the basics on repaying your student loans on studentaid.gov. So that's a good one to know about. Okay, so I could basically talk about this site for an hour and a half, but we're going to be nice and quick here. And I'm going to just give you an example. In the Learn About Financial Aid section, one of the pages is the Loan Repayment Basics page. And this just gives you an example. This is a snip from the top part of that page. If you look at the list towards the lower left of this screen, in the green writing, it says loan servicers, repayment plans, loan consolidation. Those are the topics that are covered on this page. So if you clicked on each one of those, it would bounce you farther down this page to a short segment that talks about that topic and just gives you some ideas of things that you might need to know as a mentor, or a couple of things you might want to point out to students, or tips on working with students or borrowers that have to do with that topic in particular. So definitely a page that you want to explore if you're interested in mentoring students about student loan repayment. The Conduct Outreach section of the site is, as I mentioned before, for those people who want to get the word out about financial aid, and in particular, federal student aid. And if you click on Conduct Outreach on the home page, this is where you're going to land, this page that you see here on the screen. This section is split into host and events. What to do if you want to have a college night or something. Make a presentation. That's for the people who are brave enough to actually try to do the presentation about financial aid or the FAFSA themselves. Target specific audiences, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. That's for people who are maybe dealing with parents or military families or non-U.S. citizens. Some of those audiences that have slightly different questions than the sort of generic, general public. Write articles and emails is another page in this section. And we give ideas on that page about, you might want to send out an email to your constituents or the people in your organization or your students if you're at a school about X topic, and here's where you can get information from us, from Federal Student Aid. And we encourage people, just feel free to copy and paste from our website. Just go to studentaid.gov, find the content, copy it, paste it, create your email or your newsletter article out of it. You're absolutely free to do that. This is government information. We don't have a copyright on that. The only thing is that you're not allowed to sell it, and you're not allowed to claim that you are the Department of Education. But we definitely want that information to get out there. So please copy and paste. You don't have to rewrite it. There's no problem. And then the final page in this section is share public service announcements. And that just links actually links over to studentaid.gov, because we have a page there that has radio and TV public service announcements. And we're just letting people know that these exist, and if they want to just show them at the beginning of a college night to inspire people, or put them on their school TV station or whatever, that's available to you. Also in the targeting your outreach section, so I was talking about the conduct outreach, and then I mentioned targeting your outreach has ideas for working with parents or borrowers or non-U.S. citizens or military families. I think adult students is in there as well. So there is a page in there for borrowers, because borrowers have a lot of really specific questions. So what we have on this page is ideas for those of you who are kind of trying to help advise borrowers, and they come to you with these questions like, you know what, I know I have a student loan, but I have no idea how to make my payment. Or I'm transferring to another college, and I don't know what happens with my student loans at this point. What do I need to do? What happens automatically? Is there paperwork? Who do I contact? Who do I let know about it? What's the school's role in that? What if I can't afford to make my monthly payment? All that kind of stuff. These things are covered in this section to help you advise the students. The Get Training section of the site has information on professional development opportunities, including classroom training, webinars, and resources for self-instruction. It also has information on the National Training for Counselors and Mentors Initiative, which is a free training, usually about 4 hours long. It's offered by a number of states, and I'm just going to recommend that you take a look at the site to learn more about that, because that would be a whole other webinar if I was going to tell you all about that. It's very, very cool, and it's very, very free. Also, check out the Get Training page, just the main Get Training page that's shown on this screen right here, because what we do is we try to keep that up to date with information about things that we have upcoming. So I think right now there's information on there about a couple of events in Nevada this week. There's some training of trainers going on, and there's a couple of roundtable discussions for federal student aid to share information about resources that we have, but then also for organizations to talk about their best practices in advising students about college access. And this is all free stuff. So I think that's amazingly cool what people out there are doing. Also on that page right now, we have links to a couple of archived webinars that have been done over the last few months. One was about scholarships, and one was about the FAFSA. It was called What's New on the FAFSA. So unless you get completely sick of hearing my voice, you might want to check out one of those, because I did both of those. Okay, and then there's the Search Tools and Resources page. That's the fourth and final section of the Financial Aid Toolkit. This is a searchable database of resources. You can go to this page, and there's this thing that we call the filter search, and it's got these drop-down boxes. It's right in the middle of this screen that you're looking at right now. Each drop-down gives you different options that you can choose from. So you can filter your search by the resource type, for instance, videos, presentations, how-to guides. The audience type, for instance, middle school students, parents, adult students, high school counselors, college access organizations, just all kinds of different audiences that a resource might speak to. The topic drop-down might be FAFSA completion, it might be loan repayment, it might be financial literacy, and then for some of our resources, they are particularly useful at certain times of year. So for some of them, the time of year drop-down will be relevant. And then once you select whatever you want from each of those boxes, and you can just not select anything from one of the boxes if you want, then you click Get Resources, which is that dark red box over toward the right-hand side of the screen, and that is going to result in a results page. And it shows you, it reminds you at the top what the items were that you had selected in your drop-down, and then down below, it gives you a list of the resources that match your search criteria. It gives you a link to open or download the resource, gives you a short description of the resource so you can be sure that, yeah, this is something you're interested in looking at further. And in some cases, it gives you links to closely related resources. So for instance, if there's an archived webinar, maybe we'll also provide the PowerPoint presentation from that webinar along with it. We do have an RSS feed on this page so that you can subscribe and find out when a new resource is added or updated on the site. And I just wanted to show you really quickly. So if you went to the Search Tools and Resources page, and in the Topics drop-down, you selected options that you felt were appropriate for responsible borrowing as kind of a theme that you wanted to present. You might select types of aid, like to learn about loans, loan repayment, financial literacy, and consumer protection, because those could all kind of come into play with responsible borrowing. So if you went to that filter search and you just used the topic drop-down and you selected those four things, a few of the results that would come up, these are just examples, would be a fact sheet called Got a Federal Student Loan, Be a Responsible Borrower. We've got an infographic about repayment plans. We have an article/fact sheet called Student Loans Avoiding Deceptive Offers, which was put together by the Federal Trade Commission. There's a presentation called Successfully Managing Your Student Loans. So it's a PowerPoint. In fact, I think it's just been updated again just recently. There's a video on responsible borrowing. So you can see we've got a whole wide variety of things, and these are not all the results you get from that. This is just a selection that I put up in order to show you the range of items that we have on this site. It's really amazing, and it's being added to all the time. It's being updated. Once in a while, something will go away because we've got something better to replace it with. So I would say definitely subscribe to the RSS feed and keep checking back. And I just wanted to put in a plug again for studentaid.gov, because as you're looking at this, you can see that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff on this site that will be relevant to students and parents, but you don't want to send students and parents to the Financial Aid Toolkit. It's really important you send them over to studentaid.gov. What we've found since the toolkit launched a little bit less than a year and a half ago is that some people were confused, even after we explained it, like described it to them and said, hey, counselors, this is a site for you as you help students and parents. They were still looking at it and thinking that it was for students and parents, and they're saying, well, it doesn't go into enough detail for them. That's because studentaid.gov is for them. So you want to send students and parents over to studentaid.gov, and if you want to give them one place where they can find all these videos, infographics, fact sheets, booklets, brochures, etc. for them, what you want to do is send them to studentaid.gov/resources. And that simple URL will get them to a page that has just this massive table. It's not as cool as our filter search on the toolkit. We have this grand dream that one day we will have a filter search on studentaid.gov as well. But all of the resources are on one page in one place, and they can go through the page and find what they need. So that's studentaid.gov/resources. Okay, I am finished with my piece, and I am available for questions. And I'm actually not sure how we wanted to do this and who's driving at this point. So somebody who knows more than I do, please step in and take over.
Well, this is Barb, and I don't know if Susan's on too. At this point in time, I guess we could take any questions that people have, or questions if you want to put in the chat pod questions that you either have personally as a parent, or questions that you've had clientele of yours, whether they're students or people that come out to your programs for financial counseling or financial education. What are some of the questions that you're hearing kind of from the streets, if you will, that Cindy might be able to answer? That probably would be the most helpful part. Also, I just put up the announcement for our second Cooperative Extension Money Smart Week deliverable tomorrow, and that's our Twitter chat and Google Hangout. So we're going to be talking pretty much generically about what it takes to be money smart and different components of money smartness, if you will. So we hope that you can join us, and if you can't, that Google Hangout will be archived. So anybody can catch that later. Also, I just got the link for my slides from this presentation, and I'll put those up momentarily. And they're in SlideShare, and I corrected that one typo too, so you'll have the most up-to-date version of the slides. So, Susan, I don't know if you want to make some comments?
Thanks, Barb, and I apologize. I was talking and I had it on mute, so trying to be a good co-presenter or sponsor here. But I think that, Cindy, one of the questions that I get from college students sometimes is that they plan not to repay their student loans. Can you give us a response, or do you have a resource on there that they think that their loans will be forgiven without even paying for it? Can you address that question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is possible for some borrowers to have their loans forgiven, but there are hoops they have to jump through. You know, there's paperwork they need to fill out. They might have to have a certain type of job, like we have public service loan forgiveness for people who work at public service organizations. Like that might be a public school or a nonprofit or a tribal government would count. But you can't just decide not to repay your loan. And what I would recommend for them is that they go to studentaid.gov/repay and explore that section of our website to learn more about repaying their student loans, especially in the section on avoiding default. Because if they just don't make payments, they will default. And then, unfortunately, what will happen at that point is they could get their tax refunds taken in order to be applied toward their student loan debt. They could have part of their wages taken to help pay that, et cetera. So they don't want to get into that situation. Also, their credit record is not going to look very pretty, and they'll have trouble getting, a house, a car, whatever. So if they want to learn about student loan forgiveness, they should definitely go to studentaid.gov/repay, and if they actually look on studentaid.gov, just like on the Financial Aid Toolkit, there's a white on black menu across the top of the page. If they point at the section that says how to repay your student loans, a menu will drop down, and one of the options in there is forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge. And they can actually explore the forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge part to find out what makes you eligible to actually have your loans forgiven. And, they should go about it the right way instead of just declaring that they're not going to repay the loans. Because, you will be found. I had a question for Barb, actually. Barbara, I'd like to learn more about the event tomorrow. It's a Twitter chat and a Google Hangout. Are they both happening at the same time, and how do they interact?
Yes, you have to multitask because they do, and they are happening simultaneously. And the way that they interact is that we are pretty much discussing the questions that the tweeters will be discussing, obviously in 140-character tweets, and then we'll have several presenters live online, and they will be responding to those same questions. So people will be able to both hear and see the answers to the questions that are part of that. So we did one last month. It was very successful, I guess 2 months ago now, for America Saves Week, and it worked out very well. And like I said, if people can't do it live in real time, they can get the link for the archive version of the Hangout and be able to access it anytime they have the time to do that. So we're hoping that it'll get a good response, and we've been kind of announcing it on all the other personal finance Twitter chats that are out there. And it's just an opportunity for us to kind of celebrate Money Smart Week and Cooperative Extension and reach the entire country in one program. So I hope that answers your question. There's also going to be a chat tomorrow, 2 hours later, and the people at the Center for Financial Education up in University of Wisconsin they are going to be doing a chat at 2 o'clock too. So it's a big Twitter chat day tomorrow for Money Smart Week.
That's really cool. And I just wanted to put in a plug for something that we do at Federal Student Aid every month. Mm-hmm. It's called Twitter Office Hours. This is something we make available to anybody and everybody. It tends to be mostly students who tweet at us, but we get the occasional high school counselor or parent as well. And I'm just pulling up timeanddate.com so I can look at a calendar here. We usually do it the last Wednesday of the month. Sometimes it's around Thanksgiving and Christmas that runs into the holidays, so we change the date of it. But you can find out about it by going on studentaid.gov. Scroll to the very bottom of the page. We have this menu across the bottom of the page. Look way over toward the right. Look for the word events. And if you look at events, you can see what date it's currently scheduled to be each month. And just FYI, for those who are particularly interested in student loans, currently the May Twitter office hours is scheduled to be Wednesday, May 27th. and the theme is going to be loan repayment. The reason for that is that a lot of students are graduating from college in mid to late May, and they're entering their grace period that they get. When you finish college, you usually have a grace period of about 6 months before you have to start repaying your loans. So we just want to hit people while they're in the grace period to make sure they understand that, you know, now's the time to make sure you know who your loan servicer is, who's going to be collecting your payments. What repayment plan do you want to be under? Because people are automatically assigned the standard repayment plan, which divides their loan payments up into 10 years. But if they feel like, oh my goodness, I didn't get as good a job as I hoped I was going to have, they can get a repayment plan that's based on their income. But you have to apply, and you have to let your loan servicer know that you want that. So that's the kind of thing that they want to be thinking about during their grace period, so that when they actually do go into repayment around November, then they're ready to rock and roll. They're all set up with their income-driven repayment plan, which is what we call these plans. There's a few of the income-driven plans, and they can just get going from there. So yeah, so May 27th, the way it works is between 5 and 6 p.m., people are tweeting questions at us. In fact, they're welcome to tweet them ahead of time. We generally advertise office hours a few days ahead of time. We tell people what the hashtag is. They tweet at us, and then we respond during the hour between 5 and 6 p.m. Eastern on that Wednesday. And it's really cool. Usually what we do is the day after, we will put the whole string, the whole conversation up on Storify for people to just read through it if they weren't able to join us during office hours.
Oh, that's good. Now, Cindy, do you also have a Storify of all your previous chats?
We do, yeah. If you go to, oh my goodness, I think.
Okay, I see Elizabeth's there, so maybe she can tweet that link while you're trying to explain it. That would be great. And I should mention too that Cooperative Extension will be storifying the chat from tomorrow. And if you are not familiar with the term storify, what that means is there's a website, storify.com, where you can essentially create a story from the tweets in your Twitter chat so that people can kind of view the tweets in chronological order. So in this way, we'll have the archive of the Hangout available on YouTube, and people can listen to it, and then they can also do the Storify and get a recap of the Twitter, you know, the Twitter chat and the tweets that were sent. So again, it's a great way to kind of make your content kind of sustainable if you can put it on Twitter and then storify it.
Okay, I'm putting up URLs in the chat section now for our Storify.com page. And if you go to that, you can see previous conversations that we've had during office hours. We've been doing office hours for 3 years now. I've also put up our at FAFSA URL on Twitter. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Federal Student Aid. And we're on YouTube at youtube.com/Federal Student Aid. And there are links to all of these actually from studentaid.gov. We've got the, well, there's actually not links to Storify because we really only tend to advertise that during office hours. But if you go to studentaid.gov, you can see the social media icons. So you can just click on any one of them and get to one of our social media properties. Mm-hmm. Another thing, and I also wanted to share, this is like the first rule of PowerPoint is if you're going to talk about a website the entire time in your PowerPoint, actually put up the URL of the website. And I don't think I did that in my slides. So there it is, financialaidtoolkit.ed.gov.
That sounds great. You know, I can't recall anybody who's done a Twitter chat kind of in reverse the way you are with the office hours. I think that's a great concept. Typically with the Twitter chats, the people who are organizing them or sponsoring them, they put out the questions, and everybody who participates responds with answers. So it's kind of neat that you were kind of flipping the tables on that and allowing people themselves to ask the questions and then providing information and resources for them.
It's fantastic. It's really cool. If you go back through our Storify and just look at some of the conversations we've had, you'll see, number one, you'll see the same questions get asked over and over again. You know, everybody has the same concerns about financial aid. And it's also a rush for those of us who are involved in it. Because I'm an editor, I'm always involved in these things, and I've gotten to be really good at getting things down to 140 characters, I'll tell you that. But it's really fun answering these questions once a month. And the digital engagement group, which is the team that runs the Facebook and Twitter accounts, they're actually answering people's questions all month long. If you tweet at them any day, you're going to get an answer within, I think, a reasonable amount of time, considering these people are not working 24/7.
That's good to know. Yeah, I would imagine that you probably have some templates for all the questions that you get all the time that you can just kind of scoot right in there.
They do have some of those, and the funny thing is that there are some people that have been working on these things for so long now that we just kind of, it becomes rote. Our fingers just start typing the answer without us having to think about it. So sometimes it's actually quicker just to type the answer into a tweet than it is to go to our database of answers and then pull out the answer and drop it into the tweet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I can tell you from that focus group research that I was explaining before, we have found that the students really have very little knowledge about their student loans, as far as particularly how much it's going to cost them and the payback, and in many cases, even just the total amount, because I guess they borrow in piecemeal, and for some reason they never seem to add up the total amount that they've had from maybe 8 different semesters. So we found that kind of came across loud and clear, and also the fact that they're really worried. They are just worried about getting a job that can sustain the payments, and having such a debt load, and will that affect their attractiveness as a marriage partner, perhaps? And I mean, a lot of those questions, very personal, emotional type of feelings that people have about their loans that we were able to see in the quotes that they had from their responses to those questions.
Cindy, Susan Shockey, I have a question. Do you have a resource on this federal student aid where they can compare costs for going to higher education? So a parent and a child, you can make a decision about what the cost, and considering private to a land-grant university. Do you know of a resource that we can tweet out or put in the chat box for them?
Yeah, one of the things that we do have, we have a couple of ways that they can do that. They can go on College Navigator, which is a school search, and that will give costs of different schools. There's also collegecost.ed.gov that gives kind of even beyond cost. It kind of starts getting toward the value of different schools. And these are all actually linked from the Financial Aid Toolkit. Let me just make sure. Are we going to have, when this session is over, are we going to have email addresses for the people who participated?
No, but what we will have the option to do is any documents or other resources we can add to the Learn page, so people can just go back to that page, and that's kind of like your base camp for as you will for anything related to this webinar.
Okay, yeah, that's fantastic, because I can make a few recommendations on there. I just don't have the URLs off the top of my head right now.
Oh, that's okay. Thanks, Cindy. I also wanted to give recognition to Elizabeth Coogan, who is the Elizabeth from the U.S. Department of Education, and Elizabeth heads up the post-secondary FLEC committee and has been a great leader working with USDA NEFA in addressing this. So Elizabeth, and thanks to our E-Extension Financial Security for All team, they did a review of this fact sheet, but there is a fact sheet on mymoney.gov on paying for college that you should look for also. You're quite welcome, Elizabeth. So it's mymoney.gov, and then look for paying for college. And it lists all the other federal agencies who are helping with this too. Thanks, Cindy, for the toolkit. resource?
Yeah, sure. And the URL that I've just put up is for a short PDF. It's just a few pages long, called Federal Student Aid Financial Literacy Resources. And within that PDF, there is a table of different topics that have to do with financial literacy, such as general awareness and understanding of federal student aid, thinking about college and career and middle school, and there's a whole section of this table called Helping Pre-College Students Assess College Affordability. And that links right to collegecost.ed.gov. It mentions some things that are on studentaid.gov. This is a great resource that we definitely recommend that mentors check out for sure and send students to the appropriate spots.
Well, do we have any additional questions? Barb, I have a question for you. When do you think you're going to have the focus group results?
Well, we have the results, and the team is busily putting together this article that we plan to submit to the Journal of Financial Counseling and Planning next month. So when it will get published, I have no idea. You know, we're hoping for a successful outcome and a quick outcome as far as the publication of the results. And we may have some other snippets of research that we would publish as well, and certainly maybe a research brief that we can put on the E-Extension student loan page. So it's a work in progress. And then I know the experimental group, they are hard at work crunching their numbers too. And Michael Gutter from University of Florida and Elizabeth Kiss from Kansas State University, those are two of the key people on that research effort. And I know Elizabeth spent some time down in Florida last month, and they put a lot of numbers together. So that should be coming out pretty soon too, we hope.
Very good. And I just want, again, to mention that I would imagine that the FLEX Post-Secondary Committee will be very interested. FLEX stands for the Financial Literacy Education Commission, and USDA, U.S. Department of Education, other government agencies, about 21 of us. White House is involved too. Treasury is chair of that, and then the assistant chair is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But I would think that they would be very interested in your research. I
hope so. Yeah, and then they can share it through their channels. That would be great.
Yeah. Well, I have 2 minutes till. I think this has been a great in-service webinar. Thank you for your dedication, both of you, for helping address this important topic. Barb, you identified the critical issues of why we are concerned in this area in family and consumer economics. It not only affects personal lives, but it also affects our communities throughout society. And you know, I just think that we have a role. We as educators and specialists, researchers, have a role to address this topic, especially since we work so closely with college students and their parents. So thanks, Cindy. A round of applause to you. And Barbara, thanks again. I look forward to participating and being involved in tomorrow's Google Hangout and Twitter chats, and I know it's going to be just a super event. So thanks for promoting that. So again, thanks to E-Extension. Do we have, Dean, do you have anything you want to announce?
Nothing from this end.
Thanks again for helping us get signed on and managing us very well. So Barb, Cindy, any concluding thoughts?
No, just look for resources if you're making those key decisions. There's a lot of information out there, and we'll try to make it as user-friendly to get it in the hands of people.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's really important for people to do their research so they can make informed decisions. Very good. Thanks again, and those that are online, please connect with your guidance counselors, principals. You have a great, in your positions, you have a great opportunity to help spread this information. So just consider how we can work together on this. Thanks again, and I think we'll sign off.